morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about children in crisis, and today presenting with us is Ms. Esmeralda Lopez and Miscellaneous.
We'll give you a couple of minutes to put that in the chat.
Ms. Lopez, we did have someone who said they yell.
Okay, thank you.
And then someone else said that they don't do very well. And sometimes they try to soothe their kids.
Okay.
Someone else said sometimes they count backwards and they hold their breath.
Okay. I couldn't tell if that said hold their breath or deep breathe.
Deep breathe, I'm sorry.
Okay, good deal. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for those responses. And as we, I'll talk really fast. That's me normally too. Next slide. So is there a correlation? Do you think that, is there anyone in your household that has similar coping strategies during a crisis? Can you think, well, actually it's like me, or it's like my husband, or it's like their grandfather who lives with us, or it's, somebody, an aunt, an uncle, or do we think that the kids are born this way, or are they taught these through our actions? Or is it a combination of both? Next slide. So what do we do from here? And you remember that I said we're going to be building resilience. So let's look at that next slide. There's two graphics on that slide. Sorry, there's a little bit of delay on the, there we go. Do we want our kids looking like that first image? If they had to hold something heavy and they were that first rope, or do we want them looking like that bottom rope where they could hold lots of things, and we know that they're very resilient, and that's what resilience looks like. So we want our kids looking like that bottom picture, don't we? So how do we help our kids become resilient so that they're able to cope with stressors and challenges of life more easily? They have those social skills that they need for their self-esteem. They're able to really partake in the benefits of friendship, because when they aren't resilient, sometimes they get upset really easily at their friends, and they maybe have lost a lot of friends. When they maintain their resilience, they retain their resilience when they have supports at home, at school, and in the community. And home is one of the most important things. Let's go back to that slide. They'll possess the life skills to take into adulthood. They'll be able to cope with new obstacles as they get older. And they're just going to be healthier in mind, body, and spirit. And I did see that comment. You will have a copy of this PDF and the Spanish one. There's different resources in each. So next slide, please. So when our kids are having tantrums or things like that, that's called dysregulation. You probably have started hearing that word more frequently. So crisis and tantrums, we know this. It affects the stability of our household. I've even heard parents, when I worked in special ed, I actually was a special ed social worker, and I used to work with a lot of families. There were families, and I heard this more with the kids with autism, parents of autistic children, was that, Ms. Lopez, my husband and I just don't see eye to eye, and we're gonna break up this relationship because we can't handle the stress. This child's tantruming is affecting our relationship. It can get to that level. So we really want to look at the stability and climate of our household. This dysregulation affects parent-child relationships, sibling-child relationships, and it may be more than one sibling. Teacher and school staff relationships, friendships, they're hard to make and hard to keep, because if we keep, dysregulating with friendships, those people have less invested in us. So our kids may lose those friendships. The learning of others. So if they're in a classroom and they're dysregulated, they're going to affect the learning of others. And right now we're learning at home, so they could be affecting, and now you'll see what could happen in a school setting at home. and just really their ability to get along and thrive in a complex world. We want to give them everything. We see from this that it affects every part of their lives. You know, I didn't add that too much in here, but if you take them to the store and they're dysregulated in the store because they see something they want, that makes your life difficult. So you may be thinking, oh my gosh, I don't even take my child to the store because I already know when I hit that register and all the things they put right there that are temptations for our children, I can't even make it out to the store. So we want to make sure that you change your life and that your life is different and some more happier, better results. So thank you for joining this presentation. Let's go to the next slide. So how do we build that self-regulation? If they're dysregulated, how do we build that self-regulation? Well, I found some information on the Duke Center for Child and Family Policy. So self-regulation is managing our thoughts and our feelings. Before we can teach that to our kids, we have to manage our own thoughts and feelings. And sometimes I know when parents have had very difficult times with their kids, they'll say to me, Ms. Lopez, I don't think I can do it. If they go in with that, they're not going to be able to be successful. So I always say, no, it's going to be a challenge, but so we want to even manage our own thoughts and feelings because we don't want to start setting something up in a negative way. So self-regulation, again, managing thoughts and feelings. So there's goal-directed actions, and this includes a variety of behaviors that are necessary for school, relationships, and in the future for your children in the workplace. Self-regulation has become recognized because it's got a foundational role in promoting well-being across a lifespan. So it's not just self-regulation of children, it's going to be at every stage of their lives. And so we want them to have educational achievement, we want them to have physical, emotional, social, and economic health. And so you look at that includes when they're adults as well. So last quote, self-regulation development is dependent on predictable, responsive, and supportive environment. A lot of what I'm seeing, especially when COVID started, it was very hard to have those predictable, responsive, supportive environments because this is something so new, it threw everybody off their game. And a lot of the parents that I worked with back in March, April, May, a lot of them said, Ms. Lopez, we don't even have our routines in order. We're sleeping whenever, we don't know when to do what. So that's going to affect their self-regulation. They're not getting, some of those healthy habits that need to be put in place. So as caregivers, you are vital to self-regulation development. So from the time they're babies, you are teaching this development. And so that caregiver role is super powerful for teaching and promoting self-regulation. Next slide, please. Sorry, there's a little delay with the slides. The next slide is about parents as co-regulators. And that's the point I wanted to make with that icebreaker, just a little look inside of ourselves. How are we helping our children with that co-regulation? So we're co-regulators with our children. It's an interactive process. It happens at each stage of development, like I said, and it's going to look different at every stage. Our next talk in a couple of weeks is going to be about teens. So you'll see that co-regulation with teens is very different because your responses, if you have older kids, you'll see you respond to them very differently. You're co-regulating differently. So the Duke Center for Child and Family Policy defines co-regulation as that supportive process between caring adults and children, youth, or young adults that fosters self-regulation development. So that relationship is super important. There's a lot of things that you're teaching as parents that you don't even realize, oh my goodness, as my children see me, I am teaching them about regulation. So let's go to the next slide. So prevention is key. So now that we know that, now that we've been made aware that we're co-regulators with our children, how do we do it? Well, there's 3 simple steps, and they are really simple. We'll go through each one of these because we're going to lay the foundation, and they're things that are not impossible, not out of this world. I don't like anything to be difficult for parents to do. I believe that if you have clear, easy things that you can do, and I'm not going to say it's going to be done overnight. It just takes time and consistency. You'll be able to do it. So we want to provide warm, responsive relationships with our children. We love them anyway, so that's a given. We teach and coach self-regulation skills rather than being that helicopter parent and, oh baby, I'll do, doing everything for your child and worrying about everything. We don't want to do that. We want to coach, and we don't want to be that authoritarian either, where we say, you do this, you do that, because when we do that, we're not really allowing them to to understand those skills that it's a coach. The coach doesn't say you're going to do this exactly like this. Coach says this is what would be best to get to that play or do the, whatever it is that they're wanting, whatever results they're looking for. Go ahead and change to the next slide. And instruction, the environment. So we again, that environment is the piece that I've noticed has fallen to pieces for a lot of families because of COVID. Things are just not the same. Parents are home, children are home, and they're home more than people. More than we've ever had to have our kids home, right? We've had to be teacher, nurse, doctor, everything, because everybody was shut down. So how do we provide that warm, responsive relationship to our children? How do we do that, especially when we're frustrated and sometimes we're just at the point of, oh my God, I can't wait till the schools are open so I can give my children over to the school. I've just heard a lot of frustration recently like that. So we show our children that we care for them. We show them affection. We respond to them, and they let us know verbally and through body language what their needs and wants are. So that means we're reading our children's and so sometimes if they say something verbally, but it doesn't match how they're looking, we want to be aware of that body language. They're letting us know what they need. And if they're saying, no, I can stay, no, I'm okay, I'm awake, but they're falling asleep, their body language is telling you something different than what their words are. So when times are stressful, like this pandemic, we help them feel supported. Maybe it's okay, I'm right here with you. If anything happens, I've got you. We'll take care of it. We're on it. We need to be self-aware. What are we communicating through our words? And in a moment, we'll see another slide that'll help us see that. What are our, excuse me, what are our facial expressions? What are our words? What's our body language? And what are our actions? So all of those things communicate something to our children, because we can say, on that first day of school, let's say when they go back, we may be saying, it's okay, honey, but we've got tears and we're crying and we're tense, and they see that. We're communicating two different things. We've got to be careful with that. We need to show interest in their world. What do they like? What do they dislike? What are their dreams? What are their aspirations? We want to ask our kids all those things. And we really, if they start talking about certain interests, doing really good in art, maybe find them some art materials, that you're really listening to who they're becoming, right? We demonstrate an unconditional commitment to them. Go ahead and change to the next slide. We love them no matter what they say or do, even if we're exhausted, even if we're angry, even if we're unmotivated. And that's really difficult. So this slide, again, like I was saying, when parents communicate something to their children, they may look like one of these four things right there. And then we see our children respond and we say, it's okay, it's okay. And then we realize, oops, I think it was maybe the way I looked. And I see a lot of parents who come and drop off children in the mornings because I'm at schools, and I'll see one of those four faces, and the parents sometimes just break down. And then I see the child break down, right? So even though things are not perfect, we want to show more of the bottom. Even, we can say something like, honey, make sure you're following all your, washing your hands, keep your mask on. If they're at that age, if they're at the age where it's expected, all those things that they're supposed to do, and say everything's going to be okay. And if it's not, I'm here. The school will call me. Everything will be fine. And then we have our child respond in a positive way, because they see that we're confident, they become confident. Let's get to the next slide. So the next one is about structuring the environment. So what does that mean? So our homes need to be physically safe. So what does it mean to be physically safe? We want to be very careful with corporal punishment, especially the older they get. I have a grandson, so I can tell you, if I just do a little tap on the hand, don't even have to put any force into it. He already knows that, and I'm not even hitting, I'm just tapping the hand. He already knows that means something was not good, and that's enough for him of a corporal punishment. So we don't want to hit, we want to teach. We want to stay away from hitting, we want to teach. So every opportunity that you see that your child is doing something, think to yourself, oh my goodness, I want to make a physically safe environment. So this is a moment for teaching, right? So if I do that to my grandson, I make him stop, and then I tell him, honey, you can't do that. That's dangerous. If he's trying to cross the street or getting something he's not supposed to, or throwing a cell phone or anything like that. And so that's the physical safety. Now our homes need to be emotionally safe. We need to promote a sense of security. I know a lot of times, especially like I grew up with a lot of scary stuff. that we would be told, if you do such and such, the boogeyman's going to come and get you. Oh my goodness, I was not emotionally safe. I was afraid of everything. I didn't even want to get out of the bed sometimes because I felt like the boogeyman was under my bed. We want to really promote a sense of security. So we may have to find other things. You can take something away, but we want our homes emotionally safe. We empathize with what they're experiencing and give them those power messages. I'll direct you to Love and Logic. I did put a couple of articles at the end of this presentation, but I do want to direct you to Love and Logic. They've got some wonderful scripted things for parents that if your child you need to teach how to make decisions for themselves and teach them responsibility. They've got a sheet where it's already scripted for you. And I love those kinds of things because you're not having to think extra hard. It just tells you, say, okay, give the child a power message by saying something like this. So we want to give our children power messages. When we do that, we tell them, we know that you have a great brain. Your brain is able to think of what it needs to do. And if not, then I support you. Bounce those ideas off of me and we'll find a good one, right? And so we give them that support to overcome those challenges they have in life. We want to provide predictable and consistent routines. I put a little cartoon on the side where it's got bedtime, brushing your teeth, putting on the jammy, story time, hugs. When it's predictable, they'll remind you if you skip one of those steps. They're really good about reminding you. So when they see that, they feel safe. They're able to sleep better. They're able to do other things in life. So if their routine coming home is also predictable, because school is predictable, we know that because they keep a certain schedule. So if the morning routine is predictable, night routine is predictable, evening routine is predictable, they're going to feel safe. So, and then we need to provide expectations for their behaviors, such as consequences for negative behavior and praise for positive behaviors. We need to discipline. It needs to be clear and it matches the offense. Our discipline should never match our mood or our energy level. I see that a lot. Parents will say, I'm just not in a good mood, so I really gave it to them hard. And they have to go back and apologize. We want to really get ourselves together before we, and recognize maybe having something like in writing so that we know what it is that we're going to give as discipline. Sometimes if we provide something like that, we're not going to go to those extremes and then have to go back and say, oh, I'm so sorry. And what happens if when you go to those extremes, you come back and sometimes you take away the discipline that they needed because you feel guilty. So we don't want to parent that way. Next slide, please. And so just be aware of yourself doing that. Watch your mood, watch your energy level. And again, we're coaches, we're teaching and coaching those self-regulation skills. So they're primarily learning it through our actions. So, and then we need to be seeking those opportunities to teach our children before they become too dysregulated. So you can tell as parents when your child is just about to have a meltdown. When they're like that, that's when you start soothing them, calming them. I saw someone in the chat had said they soothe them. Good job. Get them early on. I used to see, when my sons are 32 and 30, so I've been there, done that. But I would watch my son do this. The minute he made a fist, and it could be down in his lap, I knew something's about to happen. So that's when I would stop it because I would watch that body language and say, okay, something's about to go down, right? So trying to catch those times so we can have opportunities. You start doing the deep breathing or something, whatever coping skill y'all use. We teach our children when their brains are optimized. So if they're really upset, that's not a good time. And I see a lot of times parents, trying to really do a lot more of the teaching when they're already upset. We'll learn in the next slide how our brains need to be able to learn. But if they're not optimized for learning, they're not there. So we're just talking and we're just getting ourselves more frustrated. Most of you parents can probably relate to that comment, is that you're teaching and you're thinking, why are they not learning? But they're upset. So their brains are not optimized for learning. So we also want to when you're a coach, you're giving the kids hints. Yeah, this is a good time to use that trick that we learned, right? So you want to give your kids those hints and clues to say, I know you can do this. Remember, we practiced it last night. And then do those kinds of things. And they'll feel like, wow, mommy and daddy are on my side, or grandma or grandpa, whoever it is that's teaching them, that's the parent or guardian. And then we reinforce those skills as they become more successful. Or if they get close to it, we want to say, bravo, you did a great job. The only thing I'd work on is maybe a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that, right? And so we applaud them even for those close approximations because they're trying and we're seeing that effort and we want to totally show them that we're so appreciative of that effort. So next slide, please. So we're like coaches. We teach, we support, and guide our children towards success. We want them to be winners at life, just like a coach who want to have their children win at games. We want them to be winners at life, and that way, when they're adults, we'll get to really get the benefit of that. So I know that if you're participating in this, this was an invitation sent out for parents of children in special education. So sometimes our kids have experienced trauma. Sometimes our kids just have special needs. It could be autism, Down syndrome, maybe just learning disabilities, so they get frustrated easily, dyslexia, anything like that. There's a spectrum of needs, right? Of the amount of need that your child has. So because you may be saying, well, Ms. Lopez, some of this stuff is really hard. You don't know my child. I don't, but I can tell you. So what do we do if we have a special needs child or a child from a hard place where they've experienced trauma? So extra patience is needed. And sometimes we may need to have a supportive adult that we don't get. So especially if it's a child who maybe has autism and they have major meltdowns, we might need another adult there to kind of, tag team with us because this child is difficult and they wear us down. Repetition is key, so we keep teaching it. We don't say, okay, I give up, I can't do it anymore. We just keep teaching over and over. We recognize that they had a response that maybe they're not learning right away, but remember, if our children have special needs, they may take a longer time to learn a new skill, so give it time. But just keep repeating and repeating and repeating, even though you think to yourself, but my other child learned it 20 times, and this one I've done it 100, and they're still not really even at the first place where they should be. Patience. It will, your hard work will pay off. So we also want to ensure that their basic needs are met first. So we have competing factors like hunger. So are they hungry? If they're hungry, and we've noticed that in schools too, a lot of times kids will come to school and they're hungry. Miss Salinas can speak to that. She's probably seen a lot of hungry kids, and if she doesn't feed them, they're not learning. So that's competing, and they can melt down easily. So we want to make sure they're not tired, they're not overstimulated, they're not feeling, maybe they felt a little rejected by somebody, by a friend or an adult. All of these things are really important for the children to have taken care of first before we try to teach them. So I like remembering it as HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. That's an easy way. HALT. HALT means stop, right? HALT. So hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Are they any of those before we try teaching them, before we try getting them to that next place, right? So a lot of times if you have difficulty getting your child to school, ask yourself, are they hungry? Are they angry? We want to get them ready before they get to that next place of where they're expected to learn. All right, watch for triggers. Are they quick to react? So some children, so we think of a piece of dynamite, and some dynamite may have a really long thread, right? And some may have really short. So our children may have like really short threads. And so we know that as soon as that goes off, that they burn off that little bit, they're going to explode. So we want, if you can visualize it, we want that little fuse to get longer and longer and longer. And what we're doing is we're teaching them that with what we're doing today. So don't think, well, now my child has a short trigger and never will he have a longer fuse. They will. This is something that can be taught. So, but give your child time to settle down first. If you're noticing that they've got triggers, my son used to get triggered by repetitive noises. So that was like, if somebody was on a desk, making a particular noise on a desk, oh, that would drive me crazy if I said certain words or repeated certain things. So those of you who have kids with autism probably can go, yeah, I get it, I know. For those nonverbal kiddos, talk to the adults around them, find out what happened that caused that dysregulation. Because remember, we're teaching all the time. What happened before? We call it ABC, antecedent behavior consequence. What happened right before the behavior? That gives us a lot of clues as to how to take care of things. Each child is different. So you may have 5 children and each one of those kiddos is different. And this one that you're going to this class for may be super different. Some kids avoid touch. Some need light touch. Some need deep pressure. So just in terms of touch, we can see 3 different extremes, right? So each child is different. You cannot compare your kids to another kiddo, right? In your house, even in your own household, because it's just, they're not the same. Just appreciate the differences in each of them, and you'll see why it's a giftedness that they have. I like thinking of things more as giftedness, so that we don't think of our kids in a negative way. So it's their giftedness, and you'll see why in the future, why they have those particular skills. It'll help them in some way. So some children are more sensitive to changes in their routine. Again, I'm going to hit on those routines again. We need to ensure that they maximize the best behavior. I can tell you as parents, if you haven't slept, you are not going to be great at work the next day. I know that I'm thinking at my lunch hour, I'm going to go take a nap. I am not. I just don't even want to eat. I need to take a nap. So make sure. Oops, I got muted somehow. Make sure they have good bedtimes, that they have adequate hydration. I was shocked. One day I was working with a family and I asked the parent, how much water are they drinking? And the parent said, water. My child doesn't drink water. I said, oh my goodness. Wow. So this child, once the mom started giving the child water and having them drink it, this child's behavior changed dramatically. So sometimes these fixes can be very simple. They need time to play outside. I could get into really complicated stuff like the Schumann resonance and how it really sets our brain waves and our heart waves back to a normal, resets us. But I don't want to go that difficult. Okay, so playtime. They need to be outside. They get grounded. It's very healing. They need exercise. They need to sweat every day. That gets all those toxins out of our body. They need quiet time. We call it mindfulness. You can call it prayer, whatever it is. They need time. Get them a journal. Have them do some quiet time. They need a healthy diet. We now see a lot of correlation with really, the junk food diets and behavior. There's a lot of mental illnesses, the next slide, that are really associated with diet. So we want to make sure, and I can tell you, I've healed myself of a lot of things by just changing my diet. So that diet needs, it's super important because we have a second brain in our gut. So we need to watch what we eat. Next slide, please. So let's look at the brain a little bit. So if we've done all those things, and I think it's frozen maybe. Oh, there we go. All right, so I'm not going to give you a hard lesson, parents. I just want to make you aware of this little thing called the amygdala. It's about the size of an almond, but it's the fear center. Remember that slide that I showed you, those 4 pictures and then that kid hiding behind the chair? Well, when we give our children those kinds of faces, we look fearful, what we do is we actually activate that fear center of the brain. So when we're in that fear center, we're in fight or flight. We want to escape, get out of that situation somehow. And some of our kids, unfortunately, fight, right? So we don't want to get them there. We want to be careful. They're saying, no, I don't want to. I don't want to go to school. I don't, whatever it is. Or they just get quiet, they shut down, whatever it is. We don't want them in that fear center of the brain. Now, when they're in that fear center, do you see where I have it in orange? It says it's physiologically, they're unable to learn. So they don't have enough oxygen. The oxygen has left their brain. It's over into their extremities, into the heart, so they can pump for us to be able to pump faster so our body can run or fight or do whatever it needs to get out of that dangerous situation. It's a great response when we've got a bear in front of us or an angry dog, but it's not great when we're going to school or just doing normal things in life. So children who experience trauma also, because they've experienced so much trauma, maybe they saw a lot of domestic violence, maybe they grew up with some very difficult situations in their life, they can have their amygdalas activated a lot more easily. So we want to be aware of that too. So be patient with those kiddos because it's almost like, especially if they just trigger so easily, we just want to be super aware of that. So what can we do? Well, we preventively teach deep breathing. We want to show them, there's a lot of videos out there that teach deep breathing, but I like, doing the deep breath in through your nose, holding it for 4 seconds, and letting it out very slowly through the mouth. And I usually ask kiddos, tell me what your number is before we start breathing. And then I get a number, 7, 8. And then after we do 3 deep breaths, then I get a number on them. And usually they'll tell me, gosh, Miss, I'm at about 4 or 5. I'm like, great. So they went from an 8 to a 5. They won't have to use drugs when they're older because if they learn how to do this, they have just regulated their amygdala, right? And then they're able to regulate the rest of their body and their brain gets back online. It's like being a computer being offline. Now we put them back online again. So, parents, at the very end of this presentation, I do have some mood meters. I would recommend that when you look at those mood meters, use it first yourself. Because if you're teaching when you're triggered, when you're not patient, when you're not at your optimal, when you're not being that coach, you've got to get yourself to a good place, right? Because you may be in that fight or flight yourself. And so you're not going to have that patience to be able to be creative, to be able to teach your children how they need to be taught. So use that mood meter. Maybe use it every day before they come to school. Help your child learn how to regulate. You know, it's funny, when you teach a child something like that, after a while, they will get it out themselves and learn to regulate themselves. Isn't that every parent's dream? So use that mood meter on yourself first. Make sure you're in a prime teaching mode, then have your child use it, and over time they will begin to use it and learn to self-regulate. And that's our goal. That's how we make them into that strong growth, not that growth that's just about to break, right? So we also can teach coping skills. We can walk it off if they're able to walk it off. A lot of you, a lot of the parents probably had kids who were in 504 and you had plans. That's basically what I work with. I don't work in the special education department anymore, but there could be things that get put in the behavior intervention plans, giving the child a chance to walk it off, counting to 10 backwards, right? Counting 10, 9, 8, 7, because you're having to use a different part of your brain. It's great. Tapping. I know some of you have not heard of tapping, but there's some really great things you can do, you know, using the meridian points, and that you could do it with one finger or two fingers. With kiddos, that probably would use one, but also I'm giving you some things at the very end of this presentation that teach you that. Mindfulness practices, those are great. Those really help your kids kind of get aligned. Blowing bubbles, again, it's using your breath. So if they're little, use the blowing the bubbles, or anything else that's self-soothing. We want to get away from us being the only ones that soothe our kids, because they're going to call us to come to school to soothe our kids all the time. So we want to teach them to self-regulate. Go ahead and go to the next slide. If you want to learn more, I do put where I have my images and things. There are links at the bottom of most of the slides where I've taken information from somewhere, so you can continue your learning. And then I have some things at the end. So if we don't deal with this in the future, we will have issues with kids withdrawing, showing more anger, increased aggression, and anxiety. I have some kiddos who have crippling anxiety. They can't even come to school. So, so these behaviors, then also because kids want to self-medicate. So if we don't teach them to self-medicate through those self-soothing things, then we start to see an increase in substance abuse. You know, and the whole gamut, some of the ones that are being sold at the gas stations, you know, a lot of kids, and unfortunately, those kinds of things lead to many other issues. We see our kids bullying others or being bullied. A lot of times our kids are bullied and then they begin to be the bully, right? A lot of fighting, delinquency, and ultimately dropping out of school. So we want to avoid that. The stuff that I think I went through in this presentation should be very, you might need some support, but they're things that you should be able to do. And if not, please seek some help. We have our youth and family centers that are now we are called mental health services, clinic-based services. My part is the campus-based, because I'm on the campus with myself and Miss Salinas. We're on the campuses providing support to the gen ed families. And then you have a department in special education with social workers who also can provide some support, a little different than the way we do, but they also provide support. Next slide, please. So here are some of the, these are some emergency numbers, emergency contacts. Of course, anytime your child is having a crisis where they're a danger to themselves or to others, call 911 if you need to. We don't want to take a chance on them hurting themselves seriously or hurting someone else seriously. The DISD police department's on here. Maybe if something's happening outside before they're coming into school and you're afraid they're going to hurt themselves, you have the police, you know, come out and help. The department that I work for is that third number, mental health services, campus-based services, and then what used to be called the youth and family centers is the clinic-based services of our same department, and there's a contact number for them. There's hospitals. Parkland Hospital has its own psychiatric unit. Children's Medical Center also has a psychiatric unit. And then we've got Hickory Trail Psychiatric Hospital. They work with our kiddos, and sometimes if they have to be in long-term, they actually work with the school to get the school work and keep up with the school work while they're in the hospital. And usually these are pretty short-term, unless it's a very serious issue, maybe a little longer. Next slide, please. On this next slide, I have some resources for you. I absolutely love Child Mind Institute. It actually also has a Spanish version of itself, and they've got some great resources. So I just wanted you to check out some of those that might be kind of on your mind while your child is starting school. And I know in a few weeks there's a plan to maybe get kids back into school. So just want to make sure that you are able to regulate yourself as parents, as your co-regulators with your children. And then what are some hints? We're always learning. I'm always learning. I'm a clinical social worker, but I can tell you I never stop learning. Every night I'm learning at least 2 hours of something, because our brains are made for that. And when we become that way, our kids become that way. My sons are like that. And it's funny, I didn't have to say, like, you should keep learning. I just do it myself, and then I watch them become that, right? Love and Logic, I mentioned it before. Oh my gosh. They have, if you go into the tab that says parent resources, there are some phenomenal resources in there. And like I said, they make it easy. They actually will give you a script. When they say this, you can say that. It's absolutely wonderful. It doesn't make you work any harder. And as parents, I don't want to work any harder, right? So Understood is another one that's absolutely great. And then I found a resource, social emotional learning activities at home right now while your children are home. I think it's Silverstein Elementary put it up. And so I put some links to that. So if you've got a pre-K through second grader, maybe they can work on some of those things. And maybe third through fifth grade, there's a link for that. Self-control activities for kiddos. So that's one page. I've got another page for you. So if you parents have homework, next page, please. Okay, that one has it. Okay, there it goes. So there's that mood meter. The first one that's kind of wordy, that one is the one that the district is using. So you may have to read it for your child if they're younger. If they're beyond, if they're not at that point, then look at the ones that are on the side. On the right-hand side, that's probably the most simplistic one. You know, are they angry? Are they happy? Are they sad? Are they calm? And using those colors, sometimes you can just have a card up in front of your house and saying, which card do you feel like today? You know, and that's providing support, just asking them that question, because they start to feel supported and saying, remember what we practiced when you feel red? You know, that's the angry. Okay, remember we have to do that deep breathing, because that little almond in our brain goes kind of haywire, and it makes us feel like we want to run or we want to fight, and you know, something like that. And I also gave you a link to where you can find more activities for self-control for kids, and that's a really great site. I took a look at some of those, and really great the things that they've got in there. Next slide, please. This next one, I know that I couldn't cover everything. Miscellaneous is going to take questions in just a moment, but I couldn't cover everything. So there's a couple of online books and videos that you might want to help your kids, especially if they're having a hard time washing hands. It's really hard to wash your hands for 20 seconds, right? So, or wearing that mask if they're at the age of the mask is expected. There's online books about grief. You know, I know that some of us have experienced some either family illness or family death, or friend illness and friend death. So there's a couple of books about grief down there below on where it says online books about grief. And then on the right-hand column, there's coping strategies and coping skills and calming strategies. Lots of different things. I pulled stuff from different places just because I thought they were very thorough, they were very good. These are some things that you can check out and do with your children. And for adults, because a lot of times the adults will say, oh my gosh, that's really hard for me. I don't understand mindfulness. I gave you guys a couple of things down there below. And so with that, I end my presentation, and I'm going to give it to Ms. Arevalo to talk about this last slide.
Okay, everyone. So this is the contact information for the special education department, and we will be sharing the PowerPoint with the parents. So we will email